Joining us now, Chris Saxman. Chris is the president of Virginia Free, and he was a House of Delegates member, and he also chaired the failed John McCain warmonger for president campaign. How about that in Virginia?
We got the silver. We got the silver that year.
Get the silver. Okay, let's get to Speaker Howell, right?
Yeah.
So 2 things. He announces his retirement today. Obviously, he's got to do that so they can get other people on the ballot to run in the primary. If you're Susan Stimson, you got to be asking yourself, what on earth did you do 2 years ago, right? Because had she run now and didn't challenge him, she might have been the favorite to win that. Now she's done. So you got to ask yourself this. But the bigger picture is not who's going to replace him in the House. The bigger picture is who's going to be Speaker. Now, this is what I've heard, and then tell me what you've heard. I have heard, obviously, the Majority Leader, Kirk Cox, is the favorite, but I have heard that there is gaining steam for Southwest Virginia House of Delegates member Terry Kilgore. As you know, his brother Jerry ran for governor, got beat by Tim Kaine in 2005, if memory serves me correct. But you would have to think that going in, Kirk has got to be the favorite, right?
I think Kirk is the favorite, but it's going to be close. Just looking at it geographically, and I think this is going to be an important election for Virginia Republicans, Virginia politics, quite frankly, to see where the Republican Party power base is going to shift. Is it going to be rural, or is it going to be suburban? Back with Vance Wilkins, when he resigned from the House and Bill Howell became Speaker, it wasn't a question of geography. It wasn't a question of rural versus suburban versus exurban. Because while Vance had come from a rural area, the reasons for his departure led us to pick Speaker Howell. And that was the determining factor, quite frankly. And there was a lot of shifting behind the scenes, and actually Bob McDonnell was thinking about running for it, but he was up for Attorney General. So there's a lot of stuff going on in the background. This is I think a strict play between rural and suburban Republican support. Philosophically, ideologically, not a lot of difference between Terry Kilgore and Kirk Cox. And then within the caucus, they'll have to decide what matters to their constituents more, or if it matters at all. So this is where the divide is, and I just ran the numbers last night after I heard this break, and it's going to be close. I think the edge numerically is with Kirk Cox, but I think the swing votes here are going to be the ex-urban delegates, quite frankly.
Okay, so define what this means, Chris, to our listeners, because there's a lot of inside baseball stuff. The 2 candidates, let's just define them. Obviously, the Majority Leader, Kirk Cox, right? He's candidate 1. Rural House of Delegates member Terry Kilgore, candidate number 2. I've also heard that Lee Ware from the Goochland area could be somebody that kind of sneaks in as a compromise candidate. I've heard that name, but would you agree with me that the 2 main players here for Speaker are those 2 names, Kilgore and Cox?
Without question, and have heard very close sources to both confirm that.
So where does Kilgore, other than his rural base in, say, Southside or Southwest Virginia, how does he appeal to Northern Virginia? How does he appeal to the more, as you say, suburban areas, which I guess Cox represents?
Urban areas, and again, it's nothing relative to Kirk, and because I think he's well respected in the House of Delegates, in House Appropriations, and during his tenure as Majority Leader and Caucus Leader, when Morgan Griffith, who was on previously, was our Majority Leader, Kirk gave up certain leadership positions to help, if you will, spread the power base around in the caucus. And I think some of that's probably going to be forgotten by some of the newer members. But it's not the suburban areas of North Virginia so much as it is the ex-urban areas in Loudoun, Prince William, Stafford, out in the Culpeper, even in the Charlottesville with the Rob Bell, and where those alliances and allegiances and votes, quite frankly, are going to line up. That's the swing vote, I think, in this one, because there's a lot of, frankly, rural Republican legislators. And I did some hard numbers last night, and I think Kilgore can easily get into the mid-20s. The question is, for a lot of these questions, is going to be whether or not some of these suburban voters or suburban delegates actually win re-election to vote for the speaker. So that's where a lot of the play is. You have 66 in the House caucus now. If it's down to 60 or below, the numbers change dramatically in this election.
All right, so what you're saying is that if the Republicans lose a handful of seats, and there's always some that are hotly contested, Tag Greason being one that just comes to mind, Mike Dudenheffer's seat, they're likely to lose that perhaps, and there's a couple others he's retiring. But let's get in, though, to, I mean, Kirk Cox is the majority leader, right? He's done a pretty good job in there. Of course, I have him on my show all the time, so, we have a relationship. So in that fact, I'm definitely biased towards him, and I would like to see him be the speaker. But what has he done where you would say, well, I'm not going to vote for him? I mean, he's done everything he should do as majority leader. They've been able to maintain their supermajority. I mean, how would you not be for Cox is my question.
On a geographical basis, I mean, there are needs in rural Virginia. There was a book written about it by Augie Wallmeyer, the extremes of Virginia. Rural Virginia is hurting right now. And it'd be very difficult for a delegate to go to those people who are frankly more in the know, they're committee members, and say, I'm voting for the guy from Richmond. This whole election in 2016 was about the rural vote and the importance of the rural vote. And, the numbers might not be there, and they have to show their support for the rural guy. And if there's not enough votes for Terry, Kirk will be elected by acclamation at the caucus meeting in January in November after the elections. It'll occur the weekend after the elections. So, it's a race. It's probably the most important election in Virginia this fall.
Okay, so the election of the speaker will take place within the Republican caucus meeting after the November election, right?
Immediately after.
And so let's just say for the sake of argument, the Democrats pick up 6 seats. I don't think they will, but let's just say they do. Hypothetically. So now it goes down to 60. So those 6 Republicans, although they're still House of Delegates members at the November meeting, they're not included, right?
Well, I have to take a look at the caucus rules. I'm not up on that. They would not be eligible to vote for the speaker because the actual motions wouldn't occur until the House is seated. So they would be deemed, I would believe, ineligible to vote for the speaker. Right,
because the actual voting is going to take place after the day that the 2018 session convenes, right?
So that is the day of the convening of the legislature, correct?
Right. So that would be whatever the date is, January, whatever, 2018. But
second Wednesday.
Right, the second Wednesday. But for all intents and purposes, the speaker is going to be determined at the caucus meeting in November after the election, and that would not include any Republicans who got beat, but would it? Let's say 2 new Republicans come in and they replace Mike Dudenheffer, who's not going to run for election, something like that. Are they included?
They would be included.
Okay,
that's my memory of the caucus meetings.
So if you win, although you haven't been seated, you'll be in the caucus meeting. If you lose, although you haven't been unseated, you're out.
You don't have a vote.
Got it.
Right.
And
so if they're down to 60 raw votes, let's just call it what it is, 60 votes. Obviously, Kilgore has to get the 31. It's a harder road for him to get the 31 numerically, but the key is going to be the ex-urban delegates and some of the swing guys who might be saying, look, I might want to be on this committee. I might want to be, committee chairman over here. So there's all that kind of
wheeling and dealing.
Back and forth politics. Yeah. I mean, it's raw politics. I mean, Terry Kilgore is really good at raw politics. I mean, he's the chairman of Commerce and Labor. The guy hits from the tips. I mean, he's not new. I mean, and if not, look, this is also a play for him to become majority leader.
So that could be
because someone has to play majority leader, right?
Right.
Someone has to get that role. So if Kirk does move up, and numerically, I would say, looking at it objectively, having been in the caucus and just looking at the votes where they're lining up, I think it's going to be regional in nature. He has, I think, the edge. But if some of those other votes are pulled away and the rural votes hold, there's a path to the speakership for Kilgore. But if not, there's definitely a path to majority leader.
The determination for the other caucus leaders, the leadership of the Republican House of Delegates caucus, would come after the speaker, right? So you vote for the speaker, then you vote for majority leader, then you vote for caucus chairman. Who's that? That's Tim Hugo now. So we would think that Tim would want to move up to be majority leader, I would imagine, right?
Maybe. It depends how much time and effort it's going to require of him personally. This is, again, it's not like you increase your pay. It's still going to be $17,642 before taxes.
Right.
There's a point of diminishing returns on any investment of time. So the question becomes who's next, and this might be a play for majority leader in the end by Terry. I don't know. It's a strong play if it is, and the rural representation would be supporting that. As we joked about getting the silver for McCain, but this is a big one for rural Virginia to at least have a majority leader in the House caucus.
So now tell me about Lee Ware. I heard his name bantered about as he could be, if this thing gets really hot, he could be kind of the compromise candidate that has appeal to both factions. True or false?
Oh, Lee has broad appeal. Super guy, very intelligent, measured, thought out. The problem is once you go into a three-way race out of 60, the numbers change dramatically. And because he's more of a suburban Richmond guy, geographically, it gives more weight to the rural delegates. So if let's say Lee piles up 15 House members from all over, and he's on House Finance, and he picks up some of the rural guys, and he picks up some of the hard suburban guys. I mean hard suburban, in the suburbs,
right?
The Lemunions and whatnot. Then the math changes dramatically, and he's going, I got 15 seats, I'd like to be X in the game. So that's this is how it's played.
All right, so give your assessment now. And so you think, like I do, that Kirk Cox undoubtedly is the favorite going in, right? But
I think he is a strong favorite.
Strong favorite to
be speaker, and I've not heard Lee Ware.
All right, so he's the favorite,
and I think Lee Ware as a name is speculative,
right? Speculative,
and perhaps being thrown out there to just because someone else wants to say another name,
right?
Just
all right,
what happens,
right? Just kind of throw it out there. So we both agree that Kirk Cox for speaker is the favorite going in, but a lot's going to depend on how the November election shakes out. Now, as majority leader, I would think as part of leadership, if the House were to lose 6 or 7 seats, I think that would also be problematic for the majority leader because he's part of the leadership team running these House races. So you'd be able to say, well, in a tough environment, he lost 5, 6, or 7 seats. I don't think that will be helpful to Cox, right?
It would be a tougher sell. Again, It depends on who those seats are and the manner in which those seats were lost. If this is hypothetically an anti-Trump wave election for the Republicans and they lose 6 or 7 or worse, then it's going to be tied no matter what to leadership. But I don't know how you make the case that it would have been prevented otherwise.
Right. Well, that's what look, I think they probably have 3 seats at risk right now that I don't think they're going to win, but it could go higher than that. And then, like you said, the other angle here is Terry Kilgore, chairman of the Commerce and Labor, wheeling and dealing, and we don't know how that's going to play out because he's kind of a master at that. So that's the other wild card, right?
That is an understatement.
That's an understatement. He is the wheeler-dealer master of all time, where Cox not so much, right? He kind of plays it straight. Everybody, he doesn't make a lot of deals with people, right? So
I can't say that. I think Kirk has been very good inside the caucus at helping other members be successful in their own districts. I think very esoterically. I think very, very honestly. He's a retired school teacher. I think he plays it above board. I think for a lot of members, the question is going to be who can raise the money, because at the end of the day, you're going to have to raise the money that the Speaker will not be able to or won't be doing. So that's a legitimate question in any political operation, is who's going to be able to raise the money.
All right, we're out of time. I want to thank Chris Saxman for that insight. He is the president of Virginia Free. He is also a former longstanding member of the House of Delegates in Virginia as a Republican. Chris Saxman, always good to have you on. We'll be following this race as we go forward. And this is the John Fredericks Radio Network. Stay with us.